Well, good evening, everybody. It's good to be with you. Let me start with your story. This is a story about a pastor and a deacon. They're standing on the side of a road. They're holding up a sign that reads, "The end is near. Turn around now before it's too late." Passing driver comes by and he stops the car and he said, "You guys are nuts," and speeds past them. From around the curve, they hear screeching tires and then a big splash. The deacon turns to his pastor and says, "You know, I think maybe we should just put up a sign that says bridge out instead." I use that story because the colloquial term is where the rubber meets the road is my experience of working with the deacons and all you wives too. Deacon Danny, Deacon Philip here, you guys have opened more doors for us in this ministry than I can even imagine. What a blessing you have been. Deacon Danny, I made a call. I was by myself in the Office of Aging during the COVID. All the staff had either retired or left, and I was by myself. So I said, I want to start a ministry, a leadership team. And I called over at St. Max, and I talked to your receptionist, and there was a deacon there, I think, who had just retired. And she said, "Well, I'll put in I'll make an inquiry to see if another deacon would like to respond." And probably within an hour, I got a call back from Deacon Danny, and I think that very afternoon, he came down to the chancery, and he's been such a blessing to opening doors. And then a year ago this time, I noticed we did, a couple of you deacons, we were at the seminary, and we did a 4-session pastoral training formation on pastoral care with older adults, and some of you were there. And that's been recorded, and if any of you, there's 4 sessions. Deacon Danny was instrumental in recording that, and Deacon Philip, thank you, he gave us that opportunity to host it at the seminary. And it's on Capernaum, so if that and the resources there, if anybody would like to get some additional formation in that, it's in a virtual format, virtual platform that's available to you all free of charge. Tonight, let me just start. So I was with the diocese for roughly 32 years, and worked in youth ministry for 24 years, and then I had an invitation to come to the Office of Aging to start a new position. I'm a licensed social worker, and I have a spiritual direction and a lot of formation. But I think one of the things that pulled me into that was I was helping care for my own parents as they aged, and they were, in that last part of their journey of life, and I just that working with them and the challenges and all those kind of things really helped kind of equip me for that. And and that's one of the things tonight as I talk to you all. I want to already say, I'm sure, how many of you here have helped your own parents or loved ones through that end of life journey? Okay, so be mindful of that. So, people in your community would say, "Well, we don't know anything about aging." You know a lot about aging, right? You know the gifts of changing, the blessings of aging, but you also know the challenges of aging, and you know what it's like to be caregivers or powers of attorney or helping with those funeral arrangements. I mean, you do it in ministry, but I would probably say all of you have had that experience personally with loved ones too. And so you have a lot of experiences and a lot of wisdom, and those are already embedded in your community. So when I go out to do these kind of presentations, maybe, some people may not have all the resources to age in place, but they may know a lot about funeral planning and know which are the best funeral homes and the arrangements, and how to go about doing that. So that's one of the things I kind of want to affirm, that you already have a lot of those things just from your experience, your life experiences, that will be skills and tools that as we talk about this, if you want to use those to be more intentional in your ministry, that you can direct, because that really helped me. For example, one of the resources, any of you veterans here? A few veterans. So one of the resources that I learned about, and so many of those resources I don't think I would have known about if I hadn't worked for the Office of Aging, was an aid and attendance. My dad was a World War II vet, and by time to get him some caregiving support, he passed. But my mother, as a spouse, was entitled to those benefits. And if you've ever worked with the VA, it is a lot of red tape. So you kind of have to know how to navigate those things. But it helped my mother get a monthly stipend of $1,400 to help pay for her assisted living care. So there was a lot of practical things that I learned apart on that journey. I went out to a deacons group out at, what would it be, at San Jacinto. And I asked them, it must have been about a year and a half or so ago, and with their wives. It was the first time they'd come together after COVID. And I said, how many of you have ever heard of the Office of Aging? And there were like 50 people there, and maybe 10 people raised their hands. So how many of you had heard the Office of Aging before tonight? Most of you? Well, good, because one of the things that we did here before, when I was still the director, we came out here to St. Max Parish. I don't know if any of you came out here. That was, I think, in the fall of 2022, and we did a seminar on aging in place out here for the region. And then the following spring, we went out to Christ the Redeemer Parish for an end of life. We had 32 parishes who came to that. And so I was really trying to work. I really felt the priests and a lot of you all was so responsive. So I really put a lot of energy into education and ministry in this part of the diocese. And we had that big conference at the end of January. Did anybody go to that? It was at Prince of Peace Parish. And all of those things have been recorded, and I think maybe one of the staff people or could give you an update on that, but it's going to be on our website too. We had the Cardinal on that Friday, we had for the leaders, and we had it for on Saturday for the families there at Prince of Peace Parish. And we had like 75 parishes represented. So it was the first, that was my last thing I wanted to do. And that was the last thing I did. Even though I retired last year, they kept me on in contract through the end of January. And I really wanted to do that because having worked in youth ministry for so many years and listening to what Pope Francis and his catechesis, what he has said about the church and the older adults, we kind of disproportionately have done a lot for our young church. But a lot of times we have kind of neglected the aging church. And Pope Francis says we have got to find some creative ways to do that. Why? So he has this, when we talk about the body of Christ, so I don't know if any of you read or any of his catechesis. He did 6 months of catechesis on the aging church back in 2022 I think it was from February through August of 2022. A really great pastoral, short but pastoral letters are on his Wednesday audiences, right? And one of the images that he had is that that the church is a communal tree. And if you think of the older part of the tree as the roots, he says, insofar as we have healthy roots, we will produce good, healthy branches and good fruit. And he tells a lot of stories about his own experiences with his parents and his grandparents to really emphasize the values and the wisdom and those interactions with the young people to have this intergenerational and have a healthy church. So I really felt, and when we were at the conference, one of the things I told to the participants is that we're here today. We are here at Prince of Peace Parish for the conference because, you know, you're the ones who have built a church, you know, financially as well as with your commitments, right? You know, and so we want to do something for you. We want to give something back for you to help you grow, you know, as you age, and to know that we're here for you and work with you. I just want to give you a few statistics about aging in our community, in our diocese, and in our country. And then what I want to do is, I don't have a formal presentation. I'd like it to be more of a conversation about what you're doing in ministry and what you're needing. And then I'd like to respond. And I brought a couple people asked them that they came out with me today to help just have a conversation with you all about that. So I just think, you know, I'm not a big person on statistics, but back in 2016, the Archdiocese did a study with a group called Quick Insight. I don't know if you ever saw any of that data on that. It's called Quick Insight, and if you want that, I can certainly pass that along to you. And the purpose of that was to map some demographic trends in the Archdiocese to be better prepared how to respond to that. And so they mapped it out in increments from like 2016 to 2021 to 2026. So it ends the projections for 2026. Now, be mindful that the demographics are not just for Catholics, but it's for the total population, but within the borders of our Archdiocese. Okay? So I think the statistic for me that jumped out for me is that they broke it into 7 age groups, you know, from infants to whatever, and they broke it up. And in the last of the 7 age groups are 65 and older, okay? So from 2016 to 2026, do you know there's only one age group? I'm probably giving this away, right? But there's only one age group that when you look at the meter in terms of the pie and how the pie is cut up in terms of percentages of those groups, in terms of pushing it up or down, there's only one group that has shown an increase in that pie. And all the rest are down in terms of percentages. And the only one is those who are 65 and older. So from 2016, they projected that they identified that there were, let me see here, 725,000 adults in this Archdiocese total, not just Catholics, 725,000, and that represented 8.6% of the total population in the diocese. In 2026, they projected it would be, let's see here. 1.2 million. So it went from 725,000 to 1.2 million, which is a jump from 8.6% to 15%. Every other one declined slightly, just in terms of the big pie. So when you look at the national statistics, though, it's pretty comparable. So in terms of census, the U.S. Census, so in 2020, the U.S. Census said there were 55 million people in the United States that were 65 and older, representing 17% of the population. So you know what they're saying, that every day, 10,000 people are turning 65 every day, from now until 2030. What's driving that? Well, the baby boomer generations, right? I mean, I'm a baby boomer. I just turned 70. But in the year 2030, the projections in the United States will be from 55 million in 2020 to 73 million 65 and older. So that goes from 17% to 21%, which is about 1 in every 5 people in the United States in the year 2030 will be 65 and older. So what is happening into our families and the reality that you're dealing with? You know, we're already seeing in our country maybe 5 to 6 million caregivers. I know Vernita is the caregiver of her mom, who are not paid they're taken care of. And maybe some of you went through that, right? And maybe you're doing it right now, taking care of. I know I go to my parish, and every week in Mass, I've run into, so many people who are caring for their parents or loved spouse or somebody there, and they're trying to figure out how to manage that, right? So we've got these huge numbers. So what that speaks to me is two things as church. Okay, number one, we have enormous opportunities of tapping this root system of wisdom and experience, right? It's like myself. I mean, I'm retired, but I'm still kicking, right? A lot of you, there's no such thing as a retired deacons. I'm sure there's a mandatory age of retirement, right? But you guys, like Deacon Danny, man, he's, this is ever-ready bunny here. We have enormous gifts and enormous talents that so many people are just waiting to be asked to share with the community. So opportunity, numbers, sheer numbers, that's a great gift, that's a great blessing. The second one is the challenges. Who's going to help take care and support our growing number of aging members in our church communities? So those are kind of my opening remarks, just to kind of get you thinking about that. But I'd like to right now, I think they gave you a handout packet, didn't they, Deacon Danny? Yeah. So I kind of want to just give you at some point tonight just a quick overview of how the Office of Aging can work in tandem to support you all in terms of how we can help invite this enormous group in terms of to support our church and their opportunities they have, and then secondly to look at some education opportunities that you can do in your parish, and thirdly, what do you do when families come to you and they have urgent needs? Okay, but let me put that on hold right now. And I'll just want to check in with you. Tell me a little bit about yourselves, because I don't really know. I know a couple of you from the training we did last year at the seminary, because they said I made them, but they gave reports about what they were doing in their ministries, and that's all recording in the Capernaum. So they're doing some great things in ministry. So tell me, in your ministry, tell me a little bit about your engagement with families, with older adults, and maybe some of the things that you have observed that that's been meaningful to you, that's been challenging for you. I worked with two deacons that were really influential for me. Was Deacon Frank Davis. You probably knew him from St. Cecilia's. We did a couple seminars at St. Cecilia's on like aging in place and things, and he was just the greatest hospitality. And the other one was Deacon John Charnitsky. I don't know if you knew Deacon John over at St. Simon and Jude. He was the one who taught me how to do seminars or conferences on aging. I went up there, I did some things up there at Simon and Jude. So those were just two deacons that I experienced firsthand who were doing a lot of really great things with ministry with older adults. So tell me about your ministry a little bit. I want to kind of listen a little bit and kind of connect with what your experiences are, maybe in working with families or older adults. Yes.
I'd like to share on Knights of Columbus at St. John Community. We do a service once a year, the Thursday before Thanksgiving, catering to all the deceased members' wives and family.
Okay.
It's a really nice service. We do photos and all this and that. But we get to, we're honoring the deceased for that year, but we bring in all of the widows from the previous years. We got about, I'd say there's 40 people that's there. And then, of course, we have some that are, the children come too. Mm-hmm. So we'll have 50, 60 people at the event there. And it's kind of a nice, in your line of thinking, on the elderly side.
Yeah, so that's a great, I loved, I wish we could just kind of pull all these together and let everybody know all these great things that you're doing, those kind of examples of that. That's a great way of, I think probably, do you any kind of rituals or any kind of, or is it just kind of a meal or social?
We have we read all the names of the deceased members. And our council now is 50 years old this year, and we've got 132 people that have died. Yeah. And I need most of them.
Just another great service of the Knights of Columbus.
I don't want me to take too much time on each one.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else? Yes.
So I don't per se do a ministry with the elderly, but at Mass on Sunday, you see the same people, and you get to know them, and just having the being a listener, and just asking them how, and just making them feel like someone cares. Give them a hug. We give a lot of hugs, and so I just try to be empathetic. My biggest challenge for me are my aging parents, and trying to kind of keep that. So.
See, you're experiencing that, and I think you're just one of many people, and nobody's talking about it, right? Nobody, unless you connect with somebody else, is like, I've got my parents and I got this situation, and how do I manage this? And yet, there's my experience in my parish is that there's a lot of people in that same boat, and some know what to do, and some are just floundering with that. But thank you for sharing that, because it's just like you're talking about hospitality, reaching out to those people, connecting with them. That's a great ministry in itself. Yes.
I'm from St. Elizabeth and Seton. I'm not sure that we have specifically a ministry for the aged, but I know that we have one of the ministries called Helping Hands that works in putting together preparation for funerals and how to get involved in getting all the things put together for if one of your family is about to get there. And that's one. And we are involved, my wife and I, we are involved in St. Vincent de Paul Society. And even though St. Vincent, it's a wider scope, a lot of the times that when we do home visits, we find out that the person who has called us for assistance is an elder person. And it's we have found in quite a few cases in which is even because of the lack of knowing the system, or what they're getting is basically nothing. A month ago, we visited with a person who he'd been working like 40 years. He's getting a SNAP for $25, and that's all the help that he gets from the government. And he's in horrible, tremendous, he could not work, and it's, I don't want to go more in detail, but we found that those things like that. In other cases, we found a person that, thank God, the manager of the apartment complex contact with us and contact with the police and the elderly office for Harris County. And he has a little bit of a problem. I guess maybe dementia or something. But he needed someone to help him to get something from the supermarket. And the guy who went to the supermarket not only not bought the food, but got everything out of his bank account. If you would not have had a manager in that particular place, he would have been kicked out in 15 days. And it's because we can see that there's no mercy in a lot of the apartment complexes in our area whatsoever. Nothing. Horrendous.
So you're talking about some of the natural ways to engage people in ministry, which are funeral planning, right, or funerals, or end of life. pastoral care, and as well as some of your ministries such as St. Vincent de Paul, which is a kind of a natural ministry of engaging people for their temporal needs, right? And you also identified some of the vulnerabilities of some of our seniors, whether it has to do with mental capacities. The reality is, sometimes I say adults that we don't talk about these things because they're painful things. They're not easy things to talk about. So I have a presentation to really address that issue head on. It's like we've all had those conversations, right? Over the years, you've all had difficult conversations. How many of you have kids? You've all had difficult conversations with your kids growing up about driving issues, or their friends they hang out with, or drugs, or whatever it is. You've had those challenging. So you have within yourself, again, a whole repertoire of ways of dealing with that. And that it's like someone says, well, if we talk about death and dying, bad things are going to happen. Well, guess what? We're all going to die. So whether you talk about it or not, it's going to happen. I know. Again, one of the best models for me was my own parents. So you've had models in your life who have kind of shown you what that end of that last third age, they call it, can be. My parents lived well into their 90s. My grandparents, same thing. And they were people of continuing education. It was hard for me to imagine my parents with a lot of vulnerabilities because they were so engaged in life, in service of the church, St. Vincent de Paul and other organizations. And that's the way I want to age. You see people who retire and they just want to sit around and watch TV all day. Well, that's their choice, right? People can make whatever choices they want. But you have models and you say, this is the way I want to age. So
there's another ministry in our parish that I think that most of you have, in which we engage people of all age, is the homebound.
The homebound ministry, right?
Either in the homebound, we visit directly into the house, or we go to some of the nursing homes in the surrounding area. And it's we have found out that there are also in the area houses that are not really, I won't say kind of aged people houses, because they are the house in which might be 3 or 4 old people.
Personal care homes.
How do you call it?
Personal care homes.
Personal care homes.
Right.
And it's in which, and my personal experience is that I have found there 2 or 3 that are very disconnected, but maybe 1 or 2 that are very engaged.
Okay.
And that might have certain difficulties. But that's another kind of ministry.
Okay, well, let me just ask one more person, and maybe, because one of the things Deacon Denny asked me to do, and I wanted to kind of see where some of you are at these different types of ministry, is to give you some, like a tool set or a skill set, so that you can have some additional skills, and like for me, it's like Deacon Denny always says, I know a lot. I don't know everything, but what I don't know, I know who to ask to get that. And that's what kind of the Office of Aging, I want you to kind of, I'm going to introduce you to a couple of people here, and I want you to kind of feel more at ease with that, is what to do in those kind of situations and how to address those issues. Yes?
I was just going to say, we have an elder care attorney that lives in our area, for Christ Redeemer, and she came a couple of years ago and spoke at one of our ladies auxiliary meetings, and she was extremely helpful when we were dealing with my mom, who was handicapped, and my dad passed away, and so she had to move in with us. And Mike took early retirement because someone had to stay home and take care of her. Mm-hmm. And, I'm younger, so I'm going to keep working. And so it was like a huge, but she helped us so much try to navigate some of the stuff. And she also has an organization where some of her stuff is pro bono.
For what parish did you say?
I'm sorry?
What was your parish? Christ the Redeemer. So again, if you can find, and we have some resources too, elder care attorneys. There are people within your communities who have those kind of gifts, who are just waiting to be asked. I've run into so many Catholics who are in these kind of professions who come to me, Mark says, I'll do education, and I'm going to introduce some of these resources to you tonight.
This lady, she's
But-
an attorney, but she has, her pro bono is called Living Legacy, and she helps elderly that can't afford
Yeah,
trying to, navigate trusts and wills and all of that.
And so that's, pooling your resources like this, naming them and pooling this, is really can help each other. And I think that's really what we're trying to do in your own communities too, is when you can gather people and have people telling those stories, and there's stories like this. So one of the issues is, like in this caregiving, is some people, a lot of people in this country have had to either retire or give up their jobs. They're no longer getting Social Security benefits. They've had to stop in their 40s or 50s. That's not going into any Social Security, and it's really hurting them in terms of retirement. So, because I do not have a lot of confidence as of this date with either the federal level or our state level and responding to these issues, then my response, it's on us. What are we going to do as a Catholic community or as a wider community? And so one of my whole things when I worked in the office was to build partnerships with community organizations, Catholic and secular, but who a lot of them are faith-based. That is, as part of their mission, they are intentional about reaching out to faith-based communities. The VA has in fact, when I started this work at the VA, I went to there is I don't know if you knew, the federal government back in the George Bush and the younger and Obama, they created a faith-based outreach for the VA. And I went to this meeting, was for they were like deacons and other people there, and the guy who was in charge was a parishioner at St. Lawrence Parish, and so he opened the door through his pastor, and we did this VA seminar, at St. Lawrence. And we had a full house. We had to repeat it several times. So I'm just saying, there's a lot of Catholics out there, or probably in your own community, that if we just get together and have these conversations, that can help you on a lot of these issues. So. Let me just take a few minutes then and maybe give you some tools, okay, to respond to some of these things. And then I have a couple of people here who I've asked just to say a few words about their services too. So the first one on your list is quality
of the agent?
Yes. Now, there's a lot of ways you can do this. Yeah, I'm not going to. I've done just whole seminars on this topic here. I like to do it in intergenerational ways. You got anybody doing baptism formation? A lot of these young parents, they're so stressed out. I adopted a girl 24 years ago as a single parent. I was doing ministry, and you know who helped me as caregiving? My Baptist neighbors. I couldn't get anybody from the Catholic community to help me. I'm not complaining about it. I'm simply saying that, I think that we have to look at our resources within our community of how we can care for one another. So, we have to know what those needs are, but we have to be able to respond to those needs as well. So, just intergenerational different ways of coming together through baptism classes. Grandparents or people who, if you can pair them with a young, in your baptism teams, just to be like a mentor. They don't have to just check in with them. Maybe even being a babysitter. I don't know if you probably have to do virtues training for all that. I get that. But you could even do it you can find some creative ways in doing it. Just a phone call saying, hey, I'm just thinking about you. Hey, or can we make a dinner and bring a dinner over? for your families, because they're really stressed out, young families. They don't have time to do a lot of this church stuff when they're dealing with babies and all that kind of stuff. But I think grandparents would love to, be able to help out with things like that. So there are things that I think, just think about you're currently doing in your ministries where you could begin to invite some of the older adults into doing that. And I was working with somebody from the youth office over at Camp Cappy. He was one of their staff he was in charge of they have these animals for the school of education out there for the Catholic schools during the week, and they got pigs and all sorts of farm animals. He said, "Man, my budget, I can't afford to pay for all this feed for them." I said, "Well, why don't you give me a proposal and I'll take to our seniors to like adopt a pig, or adopt Sally the pig or whatever it is." And so we started doing that, and I said, for $5 a month you can feed Sally the pig or whatever, and then the kids will do a video and then of how that affected them, and then share it with you at some point. I mean, it's just a matter of thinking about what you do in ministry and connecting the different generations together to have those kind of conversations. But like you said, this elder law attorney, or it's finding the gifts that are already within your community to help provide that education or that support that you need. The second one is the one that has to do with education. You all have a lot of experiences already about caregiving, right? And just to bring people together to talk about their caregiving experiences. Like tonight, you're sharing these resources with each other. You can just start out by having an inquiry about caregiving, and then I'm going to introduce you to a professional here who does that in a minute, and bring her in as kind of somebody who can give that kind of support if you need an outside caregiving support. So education, we do these seminars here, and people say, so we finish these seminars, they say, when are you going to come back and do it another one? I go like, the purpose of this was to show you how to do it, and then we give you a list. So you have a list. One of the things we gave, this was a list of all there were two lists here from our Catholic Conference at Prince of Peace, and one is the top sheet are all the presenters and their contacts. And I think it's even, you can see the topics or the companies or their agencies. They're all willing to come out to your parishes to talk. So if you don't feel qualified or you need someone, they're willing to come out and do that. And then the second page are all the vendors. We had like 30-some vendors, mobility companies, the VA. You don't have to wait for the office to do seminars. They'll come out and do them at your parish, to your senior groups, or to your whole community. Because I think it's not just, who's going to come to that? It's probably going to be like the older adults and you, the children of older adults. Probably that's most likely who's going to come to those type of events. But eventually you want your community to own this, right? That we're all responsible for the care of our seniors, our older adults. So that's just a practical, and a lot of them you see in Spanish. That's the one thing I wanted to do. I know not everybody's comfortable with that, but I just said that's a reality in our Archdiocese. And Olga Nahar, who's here with us tonight as an associate director, I hired her because I really felt we needed to reach out to the new immigrants. People are coming and they're still need some help learning those resources in Spanish. So there are people there in Spanish too. And Olga is going to say a few words later tonight about the office resources there too. She's in charge of the education in English and Spanish, but also all you have to do is call Olga, and if you don't know, you know of a topic, she can help you with those topics. The last piece on that, on your, are there any questions about that? Just, it's, I went out to a parish down in Lake Jackson, and they said, would you come? We want to do adult education on aging. So I said, okay. I went down there. They're like 10 people, and they had 10. They were all fighting. So I said, look, tell me what you want. I said, you know the story of the blind man and the elephant? You know, everyone touches it, a different part, and they say it's this or that. And I said, you all have a part of the same elephant. It's just about, where do you want to start? And they said, we want to start with getting our legal stuff. And one of the people in the parish said, well, I have an elder, her spouse was an elder law attorney. So he was the one who was going to give the presentation, the first one to start. And they said, oh, Mark, it was so great because you validated everybody's need for something in aging, but you also helped us prioritize where you want to start. So one of the things that I always do when I go out to groups, I always ask, can I have a focus group of some seniors who would come and tell me what you want? Rather than me just saying, we're going to do these topics for you. I would go and I'd say, could I have 6 or 7 seniors who would just tell me what's really important to you? And then we prioritize, like, here are the top 3, and then you can just call on the list or talk to Olga over here. And they can help you to get started, you know, if you're not ready to do that yourself. So that's that. Is there any questions on those 2 pieces? Because the last piece, I'm going to give you in one more handout here, and that's on what do you do with families come to you? Not St. Vincent de Paul, that's great, but what if they come to you and you don't know what to do, right? So I want you to have just a list of those resources here. I just made 15 copies, maybe one per couple or something, if you'd pass that out. Actually, Deacon Danny here is the one who, on our ministry team, he asked if we would create something like that. And this is a short version. I have a long version with the questions that a lot of people ask to kind of say, these are the questions that people ask.
Do we need more copies?
The other thing is this, let me tell you something in terms of resources here, if you need resources. Okay, one of the things during COVID, you know, there was nobody in the office and and you couldn't go out to senior groups, so I worked on the website. So if you go to the office, are you familiar with the Archdiocese website? So just go to the aging, it's just www.archgh and just /aging. And there you'll see tabs, like on caregiving, aging in place, and end of life, with numerous resources. A couple of resources. I don't know if any of you have seen these 2 resources I put together during the pandemic. They're guides. They're in electronic format. So you can upload. They're both on end of life. This is a systematic planner for all the end of life, from legal to how to start conversations about that. And this is one that the Office of Worship put together on, you know, praying, how to kind of help your families towards the end of life, how to be with their loved ones, and then the funeral planning in here. So these are both on, they'll be on the website. It was recorded at the conference, that presentation. But these are in electronic format. You can download this and give this, you know, to your parishioners. So that's what Deacon Danny was saying. You know, he said, wow, I didn't know you had all these resources. And a lot of people don't know that. So I just want you to be aware that they're there for you and your congregations to utilize that. So let me just, before I introduce the 2 guests, the support here, I want to give you a scenario. I did this at the training last year, and I want to see maybe how you would respond to it. I mean, maybe you can come up with your own. But how would you pastorally, as a deacon or how would you respond to this situation? So I had a woman call me maybe about a year ago. I was just shortly before I retired, and she said, I don't know if you remember me, but I called you a year ago for the name of an attorney. And she said her name. I said, you know, I get probably 150 calls a year. And I said, vaguely, I said, so I said, okay, so I can give you the name of attorney. I said, but could you tell me a little bit more about your situation? So she said, I'm 94 years old. My husband's 96 and he's in the hospital. And the reason I'm calling is because my daughter told me she needs power of attorney to sell my house so she can, when my husband, because there's no, I don't know who's going to take care of my husband when he comes home, so we're going to put him at, well, they're wanting to place him at St. Dominic's Village. Okay. So if you got a call like that, okay, 94-year-old lady, husband's in a hospital, she wants the name of attorney, she tells me that, how might you respond to her? I know that's kind of a loaded, and I gave you kind of a loaded, pastorally, how would you respond to that? Come on, you guys, I know you guys have had tough.
Go to the webpage, go to your webpage.
Yeah, you could, yeah.
I'd ask him what he wants.
Yeah, and you know what?
Dad involved in this decision?
That's right, because one of the things with aging is what happens if older adults don't make plans, if we don't help them with their plans we all come to a time in our lives when we begin, our capacities, our physical and mental and capacities begin to diminish, right? I'm sure some of you have experienced it. I've experienced that. Your parent, you know that. And if you don't have something in place to answer the big question, who's going to help you and take care of you, then you could be in a bad place, right? And what happens then? You lose control over the situation, and what happens? Somebody else is making decisions for you, right? You lose your autonomy, your sense of autonomy. And that's one of the essential things that we want to do pastorally as church, is to honor the wishes of our loved ones insofar as we can, and respect their wishes. Now, my dad, for example, as he had a TIA, a little mini stroke, and we tried to get housekeeping, and he lived up in Indiana. And we tried for a year. We tried, my two brothers and I, we tried to do this. And I went home like at Christmas, and my mother was completely worn out. And my other brother, who lived up there, said, "Mark, we got to do something." So we prayed about it, and I said, let's listen to what you want. My dad said, "I want to stay in my home." My mom said, "I want to move to an alternative living." I said, "Okay." So I said, "Dad," so we talked about that. We processed all that. We listened to them. Just because you listen to them doesn't mean you always get what you want, right? I said, "Dad, for a year we've tried these kind of things, and Mom can't manage this anymore." So we started to visit. My dad refused to go to visit any of these places, But I helped put together a plan for my brothers, and I was the planner and organizer of that, and I said, "Dad, I need for you to pray about this." So within about 4 or 5 months, they moved, and he said, so the way my dad handled it was, he said, "I'm doing this out of love for your mother." And I said, "Great, Lord." I don't care how he internalized that, but that's a sacrifice I'm making for my mother. And as soon as my mother got there, she was like a schoolgirl, right? Because they're fixing her meals. And then when she was able to do that, then what? Then she was able to help my dad and be her caregiver. So that's right. So, okay, so let's come back to this scenario here, all right? So that's exactly what I did. So I said to the lady, "You sound kind of depressed to me." So I could have gone and gotten my resources. I had my resource bag. I knew that. I had my attorneys in there, but I said, "You sound kind of depressed. What do you want to do?" And she said, "I want to stay in my own home." I said, "Well," so that's what Vernita was here. And I put her in touch with Vernita here. And Vernita's going to just say a little bit about her services in a minute. And what I was trying to do, I said, let's see if we can buy some time for about a month. Get your husband home, have a caregiving. I don't know how much you can afford or what, but let them assess all that. And if we can buy some time, then you can step back and look at we can get you an attorney, and I gave her the name of an attorney. Then you can step back as a family and work all of these out in a more unemotional kind of way, right? And they did, and she called me 2 weeks later. She said, Mark, thank you so much. We got this caregiver in my house, and I'm so happy, and we're working on these other kind of things too, to have a contingency plan in case we can't keep living in my house, right? So step one always in pastoral care, right, is to step back and say, tell me what you want. Let me listen to you. Or let's pray about this. Can I pray with you, about this? And I so often with my family, I don't know what to pray. I said, Lord, just give me the wisdom and the courage to do this, right? And with that, then we move into. So in your packet is a systematic packet of resources there on a lot of different topics. They've all been vetted, so I very carefully, we only would get people in the office who were mission-based. If they were business-based, profit-based, and there were people like that, I'd get a lot of calls from people, we would not use them. So that's a list there from Catholic resources on a lot of different topics, memory care, and that's kind of a resource for you all in case to have that. Or like Deacon said, maybe you want to share it with your receptionist. I never knew who to give that to. We did a training at Prince of Peace on how to have these how to make a good referral. But what I just demonstrated for you was really the technique that you do. It's just listen to what they want and say, and if you don't know, because a lot of times people are like, I don't know what to do. I don't want to go. Call the Office of Aging. Or you have a directory there, but they'll help you with those resources there. So let me, do you have any questions about this piece here? I was trying to just give you some suggestions for how to engage older adults. The best thing you can do is you just share some of the creative things you're doing with one another and get ideas from each other. And in education, get a focus group of some of your seniors. How many of you have an active senior group in your parish? Okay, so back when I started in 2016, 2017, we had 104 parishes in the diocese that had an active senior group. When COVID hit, we lost about 30 of them. They're coming back now, they're swinging back to, so they're in the 70s or something like that, Olga? How many active senior groups?
80.
80, okay, so
We're still growing.
they're kind of growing back, and we lost some of those leadership and some of that, but it's growing back in that. And they're given resources too, but be a resource to them, check in with them, because the office visits all those groups eventually over the course of time. So any questions about that? Because I just want to introduce these two, so you have connections on a couple of resources.